Welcome back to part 2 of building a cheap gaming PC. If you haven't seen part 1, I will place a link here in the top, or you can see in the description below for a link to that video. So now I know actually what kind of parts I'm going to use in this system, but before we do that, I think the case looks a little bit boring, and I'm going to do something I have never done before. That's using this, and we are going to end it with some clear coat. If you want to skip to the build log where we use the new parts I'm going to use in this system, you can just skip the video and see in the description below for timestamp. But if you want to see me doing something I have never done before, painting a computer case, you can continue watching. But before we do that, I have to strip the case of the parts, make it ready for the paint job. So come along and let's transform this computer case into something that looks a little bit more exciting, hopefully. Okay, before I paint the case, I have to clean all of the surfaces. I'm going to remove all of the parts from the inside here. I think I'm going to paint the top here, the side panel of course, and the front here. I don't think we really need the DVD drive, but I don't have the placeholder plastic bracket thing here, so I think I'm also going to actually paint the front of the DVD drive. And this is not a side panel I can take off easily. It's being held in by rivets. I don't want to drill them out. But yeah, I think I'm going to paint on the back, on the side here, on the top, and on the front. So we'll have to find a way to try to remove the ports here and just rip off the front plate, like so. So here's the cables for the front USB connector, and here are the cables for the LEDs. I think I'm just going to plug this out and just paint this front here. It's time for ripping out the parts and preparing the case for some primer. So I have managed to get the parts I'm going to use in this build. So let's take a look at the parts and just talk a little bit about them and why I chose these parts. And I think we can begin with the most important part in a gaming PC build, and it's the GPU. It's a GeForce GTX 1660 Super GPU. This will be able to handle 1080p gaming in a good way. In addition, it has a good price to performance ratio, and the power consumption isn't that high. It will draw about 125 watts at maximum. In a gaming PC, the GPU is one of the most important parts, and I wanted to get a brand new GPU with warranty and a better efficiency, and I was also able to buy this one at a sale for a reduced price. So this donor system has an old Shiftech power supply, and I think it would be able to run this system with this GPU, but I would have to use a PCI Express to SATA cable to be able to run the GPU in this system. But that wouldn't leave that much headroom for a potential overclock. It would probably only be able to run at stock settings. Also, using an old power supply, I think this power supply is almost 10 years old, is a little gambling, because if the power supply breaks, it will probably break a lot of other parts in the system as well. So I wanted to go the safe way and get a new power supply for this system. In the times we are in now, power supplies are for some reason very expensive, so I went with the Cooler Master Watt Lite 600 watt power supply. It has an 80+ standard certification. It's not a modular power supply, and it will have these ketchup and mustard type of cables, but I think this power supply is a great investment for this computer because it's a new power supply and you want a power delivery that works fine. I also think that going for a 600 watt power supply will make it possible to do some light overclocking on this system, but time will tell. We will see when the system is built. So that 2500K from Intel deserves something else than the Intel stock cooler, so I went with the Hyper 212. It's a really good cooler for its price, and it will fit inside the case nicely, and it will also be able to handle some more of the heat from overclocking the CPU. It's not a Noctua NHD 15, but for the price, this is a really good cooler, and it's a great fit for this particular build. And some other things like networking. The 10-year-old boy that is going to use this PC, he doesn't have a network cable in his room, so we need to use some kind of Wi-Fi card. The motherboard doesn't have a Wi-Fi card built in, so I bought this Asus PCI Express internal Wi-Fi card. So the CPU, motherboard, memory and the case we already know about. In addition to that, I'm going to give him a old 120GB SSD to be used as a boot device, and perhaps you can install one game on that as well. In addition, I have a few 1TB 7200 RPM hard drives laying around, so I'm going to give him one of those as well. As for keyboard and mouse, we are going to use this generic set from Logitech, and the display will be a BenQ 24-inch display, and the model number is GL2480. So this will hopefully result in a PC that will work well for his use with a reasonable cost. I'm very happy that I was able to buy the power supply new, the GPU and some of the other parts as well. So the only thing that is left to do now is to build the system, and hopefully the parts I have selected here play nice together. I don't know that yet, so let's build this PC. Okay, so the PC is now built. It's a little bit cramped in this case, as you can see here, but I managed to fit all of the parts inside of this case. As you can see, the cables are over there. This case doesn't have a room on the back side here to do cable management, so I had to be a little bit creative with the cables from the power supply here. I had to throw some of the cables actually above the DVD drive there, so the DVD drive actually has a purpose in this build. And yeah, using some zip ties over here and over here, and try to shove some of the cables behind here and underneath here as well. As for new parts here, we have the, as I mentioned earlier, we have the Cooler Master 600 watt power supply. I replaced the GeForce power supply that was included in this case, because I think having a new power supply is important in a build like this. Replace the cooler with a Cooler Master 212 cooler. Should work fine on this system. And we have the GeForce 1660 Super GPU, 8 GB of memory, and we also have room for 2 more sticks if he wants to upgrade down the line. And we have a 1 TB hard drive over here, and we have a hidden behind the cables here, we have a 120 GB SSD for a boot device. Also we also have a Wi-Fi card under here, and the Wi-Fi card antenna behind here. Here is the display, and everything is connected. This is actually the first time I'm going to try to start this system, so it's a little interesting to see if this works. I hope so, because I'm used a lot of time on this, and I hope it works. But we have to connect the power first. Let's do that and hope nothing explodes. And we need to turn on the power supply. Okay, we have a light here on the PCI Express power, and now let's press the very blue power button and hope something happens. Okay. And we have an image. And it looks like the system is booting. We have some light on the GPU here. The CPU fan is spinning. The chassis fan is spinning. And yeah, it's booting an old pfSense installation, so it's booting from the wrong hard drive. But that's fine. I'm going to go into the BIOS and change the boot order now and see if we can get into Windows, install some drivers, and see if we can get this system up and running in games. Okay, so I got the system up and running, and see what we have here. We have played a little bit of Fortnite, and it was going pretty well. The settings I was using was high settings here, and it's 1080p of course, and stock settings on the CPU, and the FPS is around, yeah, it hovers between 60 and 80 FPS. But I get some kind of a lag when I sometimes it goes down to around 10 FPS. And I'm just going to leave the match here, and we can take a look at the temperatures. So at stock settings, the CPU temperature is around 49-50 degrees maximum, and average around 43-42. Means that this cooler is doing its job, but the CPU is currently running at 3.4 gigahertz, and I would like to try to overclock it and see if we can get some more performance out of it, and let's see what the temperatures are then. Okay, so Fortnite, I've been playing some Fortnite here, and it's going well. I have locked the FPS at 60 FPS and turned VSync on, and it looks like We have no tearing, and it's going very smooth. It's difficult to game using one hand and documenting this with a camera, but as you can see here, it's very smooth, and it works well. So this is the settings. It's 1080p, and it's locked at 120 FPS, and we have VSync on. I told you earlier that I was planning to overclock this system because it has an Intel 2500K CPU in it, but there's one problem. The motherboard is an H67 motherboard, and this motherboard is unable to overclock this CPU using the multiplier. The only possible overclock on this motherboard is overclocking via the base clock. So I have set the base clock to 104. It seems to be working, but I'm a little bit disappointed because I was planning to try to get it at maybe 4.5 gigahertz or something like that. But it seems like this motherboard doesn't have that option. So that was a little bummer, but as you can see here on the gameplay, using high settings and locking the FPS to 60 FPS, it's able to game pretty well in that frame rate, and 60 FPS is the magic number. And the GPU here, the 1660 Super, paired with the 2500K, not overclocked unfortunately, but it's able to run the game. Another thing I have set in the BIOS is that I have disabled the Intel speed step technology, so it always is running at 3.4 gigahertz, and doing this seemed to get rid of these kind of stutters in the game. So it will always keep the clock speed above 3.4 gigahertz. I just had to try to install Metro Exodus and see how it works on this system as well. As you can see here, now I'm in the beginning here. I've been fighting some monsters, and they are saving me from certain death. And it looks like, if I turn the mouse here, the frame rate is really good. I don't really have a frame rate counter here now, but I can feel that it's at least near 60 FPS. The resolution is of course 1080p, high quality settings, so it's not ultra. So it's high, ultra and extreme, and we are using high settings here. Yeah, it looks like the system is able to handle Metro Exodus as well, and it's playable in around 60 FPS. So this was my first time spray painting a case. I think it came out pretty good. The black worn out look is gone and replaced with this bluish metallic car color. This was my first time spray painting, so I could probably spend some more time on it and actually had used another can of base color, I think. But compared to what it looked like in the beginning, I think it came out pretty good. The hardware seems to be working fine, and it will be able to play most games in 1080p 60 FPS, as you also have seen in this video. If he later down the line wants to upgrade, he can keep the power supply, maybe the GPU, and he can replace the case, motherboard, memory and CPU. This is good because price on computer parts is increasing due to the times we are in. If you can keep what you already have, that's good. When I build PCs, some of the parts I keep between builds are the power supply. That was also one of the reasons I decided to go for a new power supply in this build. I realized that what makes a good and maybe cheap gaming PC is open for discussion, and you are welcome to share your thoughts in the comments below, but please keep it civil. I'm not claiming that this is the best way of building a gaming PC on a little bit lower budget. There's a lot of ways to combine used and new parts to build a PC that works good for gaming, and this video just shows you one of the ways of doing it. There's a million different ways of building a PC like this. I just hope this video shows you that it isn't really that difficult, and it gives you some motivation and inspiration to research on your own as well and try to find something that works well and doesn't empty your bank account. I hope you liked this video. Throwing a like really helps with the algorithm and it's really appreciated. If you like content like this, you can also subscribe to this channel so you get notified when I release new videos. For the new parts in this build, I have affiliate links in the description below. They go to Amazon, and if you buy through those links, I get a little kickback, but it won't cost you anything extra. So thank you for that. You will also find links to my Spotify catalog and some other places I'm active on the internet. So with that said, I want to say thank you for watching, take care, and I will see you in the next video.